up, everybody? Hey, it's Steve Valentine, and I'm here with my colorful co-host, Bernie Espinoza, as we're having conversations before we start this.
What a great way to start the show. So colorful.
I'm excited. Some of the conversation we were having before this all started was just, we wanted to come in and really talk about the real estate market, both locally in the Phoenix market, but some of the national stuff, what's going on. And this will probably be a little bit longer because I think we're going to kind of get into conversation, with sellers and buyers, and probably my most famous saying right now and my favorite saying with my clients is, you got to be ready to pull the trigger.
Be prepared.
If you're going to have any thoughts about it, there's steps to do to be prepared in this market so that it's not like,
Yeah.
So.
No, this will be a good one. I mean, we've got the national is so great because it affects Arizona so specifically. I mean, we really feel that here in our real estate market. And then just that preparedness for what does sellers need to know, the buyers, your investors, and just what's also happening here from a local level, government, all that stuff.
So where do you want to start all this?
I don't know. You're in charge, man.
I think let's just talk about it in general from a market standpoint. Okay. What are you seeing in the title industry as far as what the numbers look like this year, from 2020 as we enter into 2021?
Right.
Besides the fact that it's bananas.
It's bananas, my favorite saying. I mean, from the title perspective, at the end of the day, we're having the most, we are year over year doing way more than we've ever seen before. I mean, for anybody that's out there that works in real estate, that your escrow offices are highly taxed right now. They have a large level of volume. I mean, in and of itself, in the title industry, we have our challenges, right? If you want to be a dental hygienist, you go to dental hygienist school. If you want to become an escrow officer, how does that happen? You probably
come straight out of an insane asylum.
Right? Exactly.
Because it is stressful. In fact, I talked to a client yesterday, and he's like, I didn't realize how stressed the escrow officers. I'm like, well, what you don't realize is the stress from the buyers and the sellers and lenders and all the things that they're trying to piece together, on top of holidays and, some of those other things.
Well, and a pandemic, right? So you're dealing with trying to get resources from all these other places that are also working in an impact of the pandemic, whether it's number of employees or ability to turn times, things like that. So from the title perspective on a real estate level, we're seeing numbers like we've never seen before in terms of closings. I think that, across the board, a lot of different areas are experiencing that, but Arizona, our 2020 we killed it over last year. I mean, lawyers title too. I mean, we typically are second or third every single month over month on resale market share. So our company represents a really good perspective on what's happening in the Arizona market.
Right.
So on a resale front, I don't know very many agents who have not had their best year ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
without a doubt.
And congratulations to them, because the buyers and sellers in this market, even though it's been a very rambunctious market, has not been easy. I mean, there are some lenders too, right? I mean, I work with some lenders that they're got a qualified borrower for 5 or 6 offers.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on average right now that our buyers have been writing, 3 to 4 offers.
That's really good average comparison.
In comparison, so to get one accepted, and I think that, even going into 2021, I think that that's going to be one of the things that's going to be really good advice for people, is that you need to be prepared to fight and not give up.
Totally.
Just stay in it.
Gotta get that thick skin.
You do, and it's actually
get the Kleenex out.
It's really helped us as a group when we have these initial buyer consults with people to really explain to them what they're up against and the disappointment they're about to experience.
And it's interesting because the sellers too. I think sellers are going into it overconfident.
Yeah.
Right? So you got buyers that are, trying to train them for having their heart broken several times for multiple offers.
Right.
Or inspections or all the other things that a lot of them are making requests, even outside of the best guidance, don't ask for a whole bunch of stuff. You want this house.
Right.
Right? And then you've got sellers who I think sometimes are feeling this is going to sell in a minute. Average days on market is 13 days before they go to contract. So got a lot of really confident sellers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, let's really talk about some of the stats from this year and what the expectation is, obviously, from, and this is not from media, but just different sources of what people can expect in 2021. conversation Kyle and I were having yesterday about some things is too many people in 2019 going into 20 were thinking that the market is this was even before pandemic hit.
Yeah.
It was too high and we're going to wait till it crashes because people think that we're in the same boat as 2008 and there's some major catastrophe going to happen. Yeah, we've had catastrophe, but it did the complete opposite of what everybody expected.
Yeah. At least we learned from past mistakes in terms of creating a market that a lot of people don't understand what's underneath, what the structure of the market is that prevents us from having a repeat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's two totally different
Completely
markets.
Different.
And you don't have anything. I can say one thing that I learned from 2008 to now is that there's nothing fictitious holding up the market, and the market has been driven by homeowners, not investors.
Yes.
2005, 2006, it was speculative investing. It wasn't driven by homeowners.
Correct.
It was a very small percentage. And so it caused a lot of that tanking along with, the fake loans that were out there, the 80-20s. We're not seeing any of that. If we do, it's very rare. Right, pick a pay. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God.
Don't you kind of miss the pick a pays?
No, I do not miss what went on then.
I know, that's true.
So, there was a lot of great things that happened to prevent that, regulations like appraisers and lenders and different things that happened. So now we're into this market and too many people are trying to gamble and time the market. And you can never time the market perfect. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it, it's the question that I'm asking my buyers right now is, even if the market decreased by, if you buy a $400,000 house and decreases by $50,000 in 6 months, does it make any difference to what you can afford to pay the payment on at this time? I mean, we all buy cars brand new and drive it off the lot and it decreases by 20% and they're like, I just keep paying the payment. Well, why isn't it the same thing with houses?
It's like you're reading my mind. I'm like, it's so funny how we buy cars and then how we think about that compared to buying a house.
You just keep it, you pay the payments, and then you trade it in. You're like, I lost a bunch of money on it. But we don't do the same thing with houses.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important for people to really look at, hey, if you want to buy a house in this market, you've got to be prepared for it. And I think that that's the really important piece. And we'll go through a couple of different things on the preparedness, at least what I'm telling my clients and what people really need to think about right now. But I think we're going to have, from what I'm reading, you're going to see between a 10 and 15% potential increase in prices. I'm not even going to say appreciation. It's not what I'm calling. It's just an increase.
Right.
Because I think appreciation's over time. I think we're going to see an increase, and what do you need to be prepared for? So if you're not willing to fight for it now, are you willing to pay 10% more for a house at the end of the year or buy 10% less of a house?
Right. No, I mean, you bring up a really good point, right? There's pricing and then there's appreciation. At the end of the day, like anything, value continues to increase. So even if it increases at a really slow pace, you're still looking at probably 5 to 10% minimum, right? On average, I think in 2021, You're right. You're going to see a 10% increase in home prices. But how are you getting ready for that? And I think it's so funny because we talked about this before. There's a lot of people that are like, you know what, I'm gonna wait. Well, while you wait, nothing else does, right? So you could take a step back, but nothing's going to get cheaper. There's not going to be any flash sales of any kind.
Right.
So if the house that you want today is $500,000, that house is going to be $520,000 when you decide that you don't want to wait anymore. So
that's if it only goes up 5%.
Exactly.
If it goes up 10, you're 550.
Yeah.
So then the question is going to be at the end of the year, even though there's not been a lot of talk about interest rates rising or anything like that, but let's just say, let's say it goes up 550 and the interest rate goes up 1%. You're in trouble.
Totally.
I mean, because now you're gonna have to buy a $450,000 house,
which is non-existent,
to equal the same payment.
Just kidding. They're like vanished.
Right.
That price point is vanishes.
It's slim.
Yeah. So okay, a couple questions for you, like on this buyer front line, and I love the interest rate talk too because I actually think the opposite. I think interest rates are going to get less in 2021.
Really?
Yeah, I've been telling everybody this, and they look at me like I'm.
Actually, we were hiking. She's like, I think interest rates are going to be like 1.99.
I do. I think they're going to be 1.99. I really do. I think we're gonna hit the ones, and I think it's
we're
gonna happen.
we're gonna see. We're gonna
It's
revisit this in December and
Yes.
see.
But so from a buyer perspective, you've got two types of buyers. You either have people that already own a home or people that are going to buy their home for the first time.
Yep.
What's the best preparation for people who are doing this for the first time? And then in that first timer space, they may be coming from out of state, right? There's a lot of corporations that are actually paying people to move.
Right.
Keep your job, your salary goes down, but we'll give you 20 grand to go move to a less expensive market. How crazy is that?
Yep.
But what's the advice for that first time home buyer? And then comparatively, like what's your recommendation for people who already own a home?
Well, I think let's just start on the buyer aspect. I think if you're a first time home buyer, I think you really need to lessen the expectations. You may not have as big of a house. You may have a shorter bedroom. You're going to lessen your expectation. I kind of compare it, and I hate doing this, but how many people had to lessen their expectations in California when they moved there, right? You weren't getting 3,000 square feet, with a 3-car garage on a big lot. You were getting a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo. But I think that...
The size of a refrigerator box.
But I think what I'm seeing right now with buyers, they come into the perception of what Phoenix has to offer,
yeah,
and they're being very let down by what they can actually afford. And I think it's lessening the expectation from a standpoint of, I'm not going to get everything I want right now, but I do want to own something.
Yeah.
Because the interest rates are low.
Yeah.
The prices are still good. Affordability wise, I think Phoenix has been an undervalued market for years.
A long time, for decades.
For what we have.
Yeah.
For the weather we have, for the infrastructure, God, our city is laid out in grids. It's pretty easy to get around here. You have a lot of diversification here.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, I don't believe we're in this insane increase in prices. I think the country's finally just realized oh, that's a really good place to live.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the prices are shooting up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's demand too. Everybody wants something, you're gonna go at it, and it drives up the prices. So it's interesting too is that I think that when people are setting their expectations, sometimes what they qualify for and what you can make an offer on could be two different things. Because I'm sure for you, in setting those expectations, maybe they qualify for 400, right? Let's just use that as an easy number. Are you showing them properties that are at a?
That means you're looking at 350.
That's what I was gonna say. Right?
Yeah, because...
So you have to help educate that person as to why we're looking at 350. Because it's probably going to go to contract for what?
So you have to be careful though. Because did somebody, and these are all the things that come into the strategies when we're talking with our clients and how it's going to work is, hey, if you're qualified for 400, can you pay 415 or 430?
Got it.
Because if you can't, we want to lower the expectations, because I guarantee you we're going to find a house and you're going to have to go above what's on the paper. The paper should be considered a starting price.
Whoa.
That's starting price.
Yeah.
This is where the seller put it out there as a starting price, which basically, if I looked at listings right now, I'm willing to take this price or above, not this price and below.
Yeah.
So, that's the mindset going in, that if you're looking on all these, sites, it's yeah, we found this one. That's great. That's the starting point. That's not where it's going to end up. I think right now, if I look at...
That's big for people to, especially first timers, to really put their arms around that.
We are probably, on average, 5 to 7% above list price between what we've sold list price or listing wise and what our buyers have been willing to pay.
Wow.
5 to 7%. So if you take a $400,000 house, you're probably going to pay somewhere between $415 and $425 for it. And what are you willing to do? So many people are oh, well, we made a really good offer on their $400,000. You made the offer that it should have gotten to.
Right.
Right? So those are the expectations. And again, I think that in my position, I'm spending a lot more time educating people up front so they're not disappointed. They're not saying, oh, well, you didn't tell me, or I didn't know. And I would rather them know up front and bail out than to go through it and be super frustrated and aggravated.
Totally. Well, and then how does that compare to people who already own a home? Do they come to the table kind of with this mindset of they already know everything they need to know, or is there an opportunity for re-education there? Because I think a lot of existing homeowners think they do know.
There's a lot of re-education when it comes down to what's going to be the strategy. Because think about it, if you own a home, it used to be in this type of market, you could own a home, sell it, and go rent something until whenever.
Right.
Great strategy. I don't think it's a great strategy right now. But I do think that there's, when you talk about being prepared, I think it's on the seller side, if you're going to be buying, there's some other things you need to work on, because what's the biggest fear we're having with sellers right now? What if I don't find something?
Yeah.
What if I can't find what I'm looking for? What am I going to do? Look, it's super easy to put a house on the market and sell it. It's really hard to strategize how to get from point A to point B. And is there a way to keep your house as a rental, which is what I encourage people to do, depending on the price range, depending on the type of property, because that's an easy transition. Because then you're qualified to go buy something else and you can take your time doing it until you find the right thing.
I think that's such killer advice. It sounds so obvious, but it's not.
Here's the steps that they need to be prepared for. And whether you're a buyer or you're an agent trying to help your buyers, I'll give you a great example so that this helps. I think the buyers need to educate themselves on the real estate agent that they are going to choose to help them work through this mess right now.
Okay. Educate themselves. So basically do your homework on the agent.
On the agent. And here's why. Here's some questions I think the buyers need to ask.
This is good.
How many contracts have you successfully negotiated through multiple offers?
Okay.
For your buyers. What advice do you have on multiple offers? Those are some of the things that they really need to understand, and here's why. We just put a house on the market 2 weeks ago, and it went on the market at $375. I shit you not, the house had 42 showings in 72 hours.
Dang.
Okay,
that's bananas.
It's bananas, plus 2 packed open houses. We had 12 offers. Do you know how easy it was to get to the top 2 offers? It was simply no, 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 because you have people offering list price.
Right.
Because their agent is not giving them good advice.
Right.
You have people writing sloppy offers. If I can say one thing, like sloppy offers that come into my office that Erica manages, they are like instant rejection, because a sloppy offer means it's going to be a sloppy transaction, or you don't know what you're doing.
Good point.
And I don't want to manage somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So I think it's really important. Like, we got one offer where it was literally a pre-signed ink signature, and the guy typed over a bunch of stuff, and it was typed all over the pre-written stuff in the contract. I'm like,
that's lazy.
Wait,
that's
so
lazy?
Much of this
stuff is so available.
But here's the hard part. The buyer doesn't even know how their agent presented them, and now the buyer is the one that's losing because of the agent they chose to represent them.
That's big. That's huge for people to listen to that. And also, I think too, like you said something earlier about talk to them about their success in multiple offers. When you say success in multiple offers, do you mean offers accepted, or what are your tactics? Like, how do you go about doing this so that the average person may or may not know what that looks like?
Sure.
Right.
Because they're not asking the right questions.
Right.
Up front.
Yeah.
What does it look like? What do I need to be prepared for?
Yeah. I mean, successful on multiple offers, does that mean that you get the offer, or that your offer won, or that you know
what I find really interesting when I talk to my private lenders, when people are thinking about doing deed of trust investing with me with $200,000+, they always ask, do you have any references that I can call? And I do. I have a list of 5, 6, 7 people that they can call and have a conversation with and say, hey, should I trust Steve and give him money to buy houses?
That's money.
Absolutely.
Right there. Yeah.
Why don't buyers
ask
that question? Hey, do you have a client I can call and check a reference?
I love that.
I want to see how you did.
Yeah. Do you know, I love that. I ask that of vendors all the time, because in a completely different dynamic, but on the title side, you get hit up by a lot of vendors, and I'm like, do you have some clients that I can talk to?
I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm probably gonna piss some people off.
No, not you.
You know what? Here's the thing.
That would be uncommon.
I'm very frustrated right now with the amount of people that call me after they get into a mess because they chose to work with a family member or friend that totally screwed up the deal. And I will give you a very good example. I got a call. It's an out-of-state client. They called and we started the conversation like, we're really in a pinch because we're about to lose $100,000 earnest money, and I'm trying to figure out where their agent is. And then I find out, and they admit it, well, mother-in-law is the agent, and they're buying a $3 million house. Mother-in-law is the agent, and now mother-in-law has just sacrificed and didn't understand the time frame in which something had to be canceled, and now their $100,000 is lost.
Dang. So it was already done.
It was already done.
Jeez.
So
that's so, oh my gosh.
I get very frustrated when I hear people or I see like the comments on Facebook like, oh, you know, this happened, blah, blah, blah. The reality is it really comes down to the buyer or the seller. Did you do your due diligence on the person that you hired to represent you?
It's really good advice.
You don't get to go blame somebody if you didn't do the due
diligence. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that is true with almost anything that we deal with in our lives in terms of taking responsibility and accountability for being a part of it and then learn from it. But it is amazing how buying or selling a house are some of the most important things that you do in life, and people take it lightly. Even if they do, let me ask you this. So even if people interview multiple agents, what do you think by and large ends up being, on average, the agent that people pick, and why? Like if I meet 3 agents, most people are going to pick the agent they like the best, or because they asked all the right questions?
I think that's a great one. I think that's different on both sides.
Right?
I think when it's a agent that somebody is representing as a buyer, I think some of it has to do with personality and did they click. Mm-hmm. I honestly do.
Okay.
I don't think there's a lot of decision making on what does this person look like, the due diligence.
Right.
Like you can look really good on Facebook, but do you really do any business? And when shit hits the fan, do you really know how to walk me through this?
Mm-hmm. Or have resources.
Okay. This is not a market to play with somebody's dreams. And that's where it frustrates me in this is that I looked at 12 people that didn't get a house, and 9 of them had agents representing them in a less desirable than, I would fire an agent that worked with me if they presented a contract that way. You'd be done. Out. You know, and that's on the agent for not being educated on what does this look like? How do I win this offer?
Right.
You know, you're hired to walk them through that process. And you're talking about families, kids, people's first homes, people's retirements. And your job is to know your business and how to get there. Now, I can say I'm not always in control when you have sellers and other agents and things like that. But I can tell you that when you've been doing this long enough, or somebody that's around that's been doing this long enough, there are strategies, there's things that they know. And here's the thing. If you are battling me in the contract negotiation and you are a new agent, I'm probably going to win, not from what you think winning, but I'm talking about the negotiating and how to play back and forth. It's almost manipulation.
For sure. The art of negotiation is getting what you want, even if the other person perceives they won.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I get very frustrated when I get calls from people that like, hey, you know, we ended up going to this person and now this is happening. I'm like, oh, well, how was that savings? You know, you asked, where do sellers choose?
Yeah.
I think a lot of sellers choose because here's what's happening. Seller's going to choose sometimes based on commission that the agent is going to charge.
Ding, 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 ding. I agree with you on that. Big time.
But here's what I cannot sell in an appointment. I cannot sell you why I am worth more money from the strategies and my experience until the shit hits the fan. That's when you find out what you paid for.
What the worth is, right?
What your worth is.
Yep, absolutely. However, I think you have great success in not selling, but educating people on what they should have in the experience and therefore what it costs, right?
Right.
As opposed to the egoic effort of like saying, this is what I'm worth, here's my track record, here's everything, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? There's such a different nuance to really sharing and educating why something costs something as opposed to just thinking that everybody does the same thing.
But I also think that people need to learn to, agents especially, when you talk to both sides of it, sellers, I think they need to do more due diligence and not be so stuck on price.
True.
When it comes down to
yep.
it. And I think the agents need to look at things that, yes, maybe it is a little bit easier to sell a house and maybe you're not getting this high commission, but I can tell you it's really easy on the front end. It's really hard on the back end to keep everything glued together.
Yeah. I think it's such a good angle to think about from the buyer's perspective, what usually happens when they choose an agent, what they need to be prepared for. Sellers, why do they usually choose the agent that they choose and what they need to be prepared for? Because there's such different nuances between the two, and for you to be able to kind of share the opportunity of like, here's what their opportunity looks like, here's what their challenges are going to be, here's the things that they have to take responsibility for in the form of that due diligence, right? And at the end of the day too, I think all of that represents a spectrum of time, because this is not like, putting gas in your car. It's not a quick transaction.
Right.
Some of these efforts can take, even though you see the statistics for our market for how quickly homes are selling, but there's so much before and there's so much after that, your buying process could take a very long time, or your selling process could take a little bit of time. Because I'm sure you're running into also sellers that think their property should sell for a ridiculous amount of money based on what headlines they're reading that are usually outdated. Us in the industry get access to better data than anybody ever gets, nationally or publicly, and things that they need to do to their properties in order for them to be even saleable. Like that property you had at $372,000, that was a combination of a great price point because it meets the affordability for anybody, right? And it also meets a great investment standard. And you guys put money, you guys made that property look good.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So when it took a long time to sell a property, I think people were hiring agents that could definitely overexpose it. Hey, we're putting it on these websites and we're doing video and we're doing pictures and all those things, and they were paying for marketing. Now I don't think the marketing is as important because the house, because it's everywhere once it goes to MLS.
Right.
I do think that if you're not doing
65% of properties.
I mean, you can weed out agents real quick. Like, just ask, do you do professional photos? I don't care what price range. Like, because that's what's being seen. I think more so right now, it's not exposure of the property as it is how do you weed through 12 offers? How do you make the right decisions? How do you guide that seller through all the pitfalls of doing those things? And that's what's important.
Right.
Anybody can get 12 offers on a house right now. How do you negotiate those 12 offers? What's going to be the best way?
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And recognizing that it's not always about price. It's not always about the actual number in the offer. It's about actually, will it close?
Absolutely. And, one of the...
How many deals fall out of escrow?
I think the other thing, too, with the buyers to realize is... from both sides, from any agent's office and that has the listing, and the buyers understanding that the agent they chose, their reputation could make or break their deal. And I say that because when Erica negotiates our offers here, she's looking at who the agent is and who the lender is, and those definitely have a weight with the buyer. We might accept a lower offer based on the agent and the lender because I know where this is going in this track record. And I know that a couple of offers that we recently got accepted for a buyer, the weight was on my reputation with those people because I had worked with them, because they knew me from my home group, and because they knew of my reputation and knowing like we're pretty confident this guy knows what he's doing and understands the market. So it's going to be a little bit easier when it comes down to it. And so I do think the weight and the reputation of an agent makes difference.
Huge. I agree with you. I agree. I mean, it's so funny how just about in anything you should always be mindful of how you treat other people and the impressions that you leave, and whether you're doing it very like purposefully because it's work for you to be a nice person, or whether it's organic because you're just naturally a kind, want to do good, whatever that looks like. It's so important. it's really so important from everybody that you touch in the transaction, not just your borrower, not just the seller, but from, inspectors, escrow. It amazes me how many people aren't kind to the escrow staff.
Okay, so we kind of talked about buyers, sellers. Let's go back to the sellers. I know we're kind of jumping, but I think sellers, there's strategies to being prepared to pull the trigger. And I think first it's, hey, what are you going to be looking for? That makes a difference, because the price range you're going to be looking for is going to change the strategy. If you're selling a $500,000 house, you're moving to $1 million, there might be a different strategy that has to be deployed. If you're doing a lateral move where, hey, you might be selling 500 and buying 500, there's a different strategy.
Oh, yeah.
And what you're looking for is going to depend on what the market looks like. And hey, can we do an equity line to move equity from here, and can you buy a house? Can you keep this one? I'm a huge advocate in this market of keeping a house as a rental.
Yeah.
If you can afford to and you can get into the mindset, I will advise you all day long to keep the house. And that goes against what a lot of people would say, because a lot of people give the advice based on their experiences. Well, because I'm heavily invested in real estate, I'm very experienced on what tenants do, what they don't do.
Right.
And, I believe in holding on to properties. I believe that they create generational wealth.
That's what I was just about to say. It's the wealth builder.
Right. So if they're creating generational wealth, yes, you are going to have some hits. I get it. And we can get into that whole different topic when it comes down to it. But because of my experiences in owning hundreds of properties over my years, I know what's going to happen. And plus our involvement with the property management company, which I think kind of leads us into some of the other things that we're going to talk about in the market, is I do believe that with interest rates, and here's where the strategy comes in. When we talk about being prepared, if you've had a thought of, I might want to move this year, I might want to keep my house, do you know when the time to have that conversation is? It's way before you're ready to do it. Because there's so many steps
so true
that need to happen. Because if you're going to keep this house, guess what? We might need to refinance it to move some things around, which means we need to have a strategy session with the lender to make sure we can do all this. And once the lender gives us a strategy, then we can go back and figure out, okay, yes, we can keep it. No, we can't. Now what's the next step? Oh, and you're going to be buying this. Okay, well, it's going to take some time to get here. So it's having it, just like if you're a renter and you want to buy, having the conversation 60 days before your lease is up is not the time to do it.
Yeah.
It's like 6 months.
Easily, right?
Like, let's start the process, because it's going to take that long in this market. I would say our average buyer, it might take 90 days to find a house. Used to be like you might be able to do it in 30.
It's crazy.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Wow. No, I think that's such great advice for sellers, because I love the strategy of the wealth building, and I think that a lot of times we get transactional in this industry as opposed to really what are the ultimate goals of a homeowner. I mean, it's like a quintessential piece to building wealth is owning property.
But I think it's also the right questions when talking to seller.
Yeah.
Have you thought about keeping it?
Exactly.
Why or why not?
Yeah.
What if you did?
I mean, here I work in the industry, and I think you and I casually were talking, and I was talking about selling my place, and you were like, what? You're like, no, you're not allowed to do that. Like, and here I am working in this business, and I even forget that. Like, that's crazy.
Right. So it's having, but it's asking the right question. I think it depends on the mindset. And if, again, it goes back to the person that you're hiring.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Right.
What advice are they giving, or are you thinking about it? And you as the owner should be thinking about those things and questioning whether or not should you keep the house.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. What would be the reasons to not keep it? Affordability? Because if most properties right now, I mean, just this year alone, most people made $28,000 in equity in Arizona,
right.
National average.
Well,
state average.
Here's the interesting thing. When I tell a client to keep a house, I'm telling them to keep about 8% equity in the house, because 8% is going to be paid to real estate agents and closing costs that you will never recover. When you can use that 8% as leverage in refinancing and keeping the house. And so I talk myself out of a job way more times than not. But I also ask the questions, if you could, would you?
Right.
Well, What do you need to be prepared for? Well, how old's the AC unit? How old are, like, you're
Yeah.
going to need to be prepared for some of these things. So it might not be, but at least I want to have the conversation.
Yeah. No, and you have a really good way about going about asking the questions, because I think you kind of dig into things from a well-rounded perspective, not just like facts and figures with numbers, finances, but you ask people what they're scared of, like, what
I don't want to set anybody up for
yeah,
failure.
like what would make you not want to do this, like what would hold you back, like things like that, because I do think that it's very emotional, right, for anybody, whether they're buying or selling, specifically on the selling side. I mean, that is an asset that they worked hard to own for a long time.
Right.
And here they are contemplating liquidating it, when in reality it's such a gift to learn that, wow, I could potentially keep this and grow more wealth.
You can grow more wealth, and I think the best thing about it that people forget, they always want to look at the negative, but they don't see the positives in it. The negatives are, I might have to put an AC unit on it, which, by the way, you're going to have to do once in your lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, if you live there at some point, you're probably going to have to do it too.
Right. Their perception is tenants aren't paying rent, which, again, we're going to talk about that in just a second when we get into this next session about this, is that, but they don't realize, and even for me, this year, I started looking at things and going, this is really stupid. I was going to sell one house, and it probably would have netted about $100,000. I've owned it for a couple of years because of the market. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to have a tax consequence on $100,000. Why am I not keeping that and refinancing it and maybe pulling 50 out? There's no tax consequence when you refinance it. I have the liquid to use.
Right.
People don't realize, like, your real estate is like little banks.
Yeah.
Down the road. I just had a client, which I tried to tell him, like, dude, just keep the house. You own it free and clear. Go do a cash out refinance. Pull the money out to do what you need to do and let it sit. Like, you're going to sell it. You have a tax consequence that you're going to have to recapture after owning this house for 20 years. And you know what? All I can do is advise whether you listen. That's up to you.
Right.
But some people are like, oh, well, it's just too difficult. And in that case, it's because he wouldn't hire a property manager because he was so tight on his money. I'm like, just hire a property manager. Let somebody else deal with it.
Yeah.
But it's I don't want to pay somebody $110 a month to manage it.
Well, I'm sure, too, that to a certain degree, you could deal with folks that it's kind of like when you go to the doctor. Do you tell the doctor everything or not? Like,
right.
Maybe, people don't want to tell you everything sometimes, but they have their reasons or their, insecurities for not wanting to move forward.
Right.
But, I think that probably, I mean, as a homeowner, I think the best thing you could do is hold on to a property and, rent it and just continue to move on to primary residences.
Yeah.
I mean, our real estate market's going to be healthy for a while. I mean, it's very, even if people perceive or think that 2021 might be slightly, less, intense, it's still going to be a really healthy year.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap this one up because we're going to go right into part 2 of this, and we're really going to talk about landlords, tenants, what that's going to mean for the market.
Okay.
But let's just do a quick recap on, buyers. I think that you need to be cautious and you need to do your due diligence on the reputation of the person that's going to guide you. I always look at it, the real estate agent is not a salesperson. Some of them are. I always consider myself a guide to where you want to be.
Right.
And I think that that's really important. Who is guiding you through the jungle, which this is a jungle right now, to get you from point A to point B?
Yeah.
And what is their experience in it? I think you also have to do your due diligence and be prepared on what you can qualify for. And I think that it's important to lessen the expectation. It's okay if something needs to be painted. It's okay with, some of the repairs, those types of things, and lessening the expectations of what you're getting. By the way, you're buying a used house, so don't expect too much.
Right. It's resale.
And then on the seller side, I think same thing. I think your due diligence is really important. I think the reputation and somebody's ability to guide you through not the marketing aspect, but how to strategize at what price to put the house on the market, how to get the best price out of it, and how to protect you when somebody throws a stupid offer in the mix that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's great. And if you want to pay for that, here's the things you're going to have to do to get that stupid offer accepted.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, lastly, to button it both for buyers and sellers, is that multiple offer piece. Like, both the seller and the buyer should be asking about experience with multiple offers and the success in that. That was a huge point you made earlier that I thought was on point.
Look, there's some things that we've dealt with this year that have been great experiences, but it is like, it's one thing to present one offer, it's another thing to go through 12 and guide somebody to making the right decision. And then, does it fall through? Does it, what does all that look like?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, if you think about applying for jobs, right? If you're getting multiple job offers, how you go about contemplating those multiple job offers, right? Like, think about that in terms of when you're buying a house. How do you go about qualifying which one is the best offer? You don't always end up going with the most money. Right? You go with bigger picture.
Exactly.
Everything.
Culture, those types of things.
Yeah.
All right. Peace out. Next time we're going to jump into part 2 of this, and we're going to talk about
I'm excited about that.
More of the market, where we're going and where we're heading, and what to expect.
Awesome.